Hi there. At the time of making this video, I have to admit that I'm feeling a bit glum because I've got my website and I've written my books and I started making YouTube videos about Gnosticism and Grail Gnosticism in particular, which is slightly an amalgamation of the legend of the Holy Grail, which is predominantly Orthodox Christianity, of course, and Gnosticism, which goes into different areas than Orthodox Christianity, let us say. And I don't really know what to do next because it seems to me that nobody's actually taking any notice of me. And this, of course, is interesting in itself, this feeling, because I think the network, YouTube network and Facebook and Twitter and so forth, actually lend themselves to this sort of feeling that no one's taking notice of me because I haven't got enough likes or views or subscribers or whatever. And it's that people base their self-judgment on, these being empirical indicators of what people think of your work, which is kind of odd in a way. But given that the World Wide Web is supposed to be a window onto the world and onto getting to everybody in the world, I don't think that kind of model actually works anymore. I think people have grown out of that model altogether. That was the kind of like the selling point of the internet before, and now I think it's just back to the good old-fashioned days, really, when it's not what you know, it's who you know, and who you know is basically where you hang out. And on the internet, I suppose one should hang out on Facebook, on Reddit and Twitter, in order to discover the people that you ought to know. People will sort of provide you with impetus and inspiration to actually get your work out to a wider audience. But this is a complex subject, really, because I think that looking at Gnosticism, it seems to me to obviously to be a spectrum of enormous values and beliefs. Um, I mean, there is quite a range of beliefs as well, but Gnostic Christianity is certainly based around the Nag Hammadi Gospels that were found in 1947, particularly the Gospel of Thomas and the Acts of Thomas and the Acts of John. So, but these are kind of have intellectual pursuits, really. And then, of course, they would dovetail in with your existing knowledge of Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, and possibly of theosophy. Well, not possibly of theosophy, in particular, theosophy, in fact, and anthroposophy. And you would, there is a certain milieu of intellectuals out there who obviously study Gnosticism on the academic level. But Gnosticism is also about individualism and individual gnosis and individual revelation and the expression of that revelation. So in a way, to put it bluntly, there almost should be too many chiefs and not enough Indians in Gnosticism because it is an individual path. You'd be putting stuff up online for your own benefit as much as for anybody else's benefit. And indeed, the desire, I suppose, to put things up for other people's benefit has a little bit of the searching for power paradigm to it, really, or kind of there's a bit of an urge to be plaudted and be congratulated, and for people to give you their power in exchange for your fine words of wisdom. So that's one thing which is to be avoided, and the other thing, of course, is a lack of trust, because if the Holy Spirit is the active principle of Godhead, then the Holy Spirit will bring those people together that are meant to come together in order to worship the Christ consciousness, or to align themselves with Christ consciousness. So those who are meant to be inspired by certain materials will be inspired by them. Will find them on the internet, and over the years, I think, and it would take years, people would find you. So patience is required, and trust in the Holy Spirit, of course, which perhaps are novel things for some people that are used to the idea of making their own destiny, and being a sort of in charge of things, or seeking to be in charge of things anyway. But on the other hand, I also think that there is a problem with Gnosticism, and it is somewhat old-fashioned. Obviously, it's based on Gospels which go back to the Gospels that are in the canon. But I mean, a lot of people just don't know anything about Christianity either, for that matter. So I think there's a problem with communication generally, in that the materials that people are putting up online are going to appeal to a certain class of people, certain social class, certain intellectual class, let us say, people that are students, possibly, and all the people that were interested in theosophy. To put it very bluntly, I mean, they're all dying off, and they're not being replaced by a younger generation. So I think actually what needs to be done is that you need to create a corpus of Gnostic writings which are digestible by a young modern audience. So they've literally got to be like pins that you put on Pinterest, where you put them on a website, and then Pinterest picks them up, and you can sort of use Pinterest to advertise your website with all the pins on it, which are just short aphorisms, very short modern aphorisms, in vernacular language, in the language of modern times, and they would sort of seek to encapsulate Gnostic teaching in a very, very simple way. But simple is not inferior to complex by any means, which is the whole point of it. And then the other thing is to put these pins up on Facebook and Twitter, and Reddit, and just with a lot of, supported by a lot of imagery, and then 3-minute videos on YouTube, sort of outlining in bright colours and proper presentation, some of the salient points of Gnosticism, and generally make it available to a much greater audience, in the vernacular language of the time, using imagery of the time, and even analogies that would make sense to a modern audience. I know it's difficult because we live in such a pluralistic society. It's difficult to sort of have that kind of audience in mind. I mean, what audience are you trying to appeal to? But I think, that there are, I've talked to my grandchildren about religion sometimes, and they're pretty insightful, really. And we keep it kind of light and fluffy, and quite humorist, um, and and sort of not too dogmatic, let us say. Even though, in fact, some of these children, that I know, are exposed to quite dogmatic Orthodox Christianity at the moment. And because fundamentalism and dogmatism, of course, are coming back, in response to secularism and humanism, of course. So, you're up against secularism, humanism, and atheism on one hand, and the reactionary fundamentalist orthodoxy on the other. So, Gnosticism has got to kind of occupy a middle ground, whilst expressing its tenets and ideas and questions in a way that does appeal to the greatest number of people, given in fact that that fundamentalism is also trying to make itself more palatable to the greatest number of people as well, as indeed secularism and humanism. I mean, everybody is basically after social media. So if you're not part of social media and the whole culture that goes with that, even down to Snapchat, then you're going to miss out. And I think this is an age issue, but it's possible for somebody, of advanced years, to make themselves acquainted with modern social media culture. It's in fact more easier, surely, for somebody who's got, who's been brought up before the internet to actually make themselves au fait with the internet culture than it is the other way around. It's more difficult, to go backwards than it is forwards, really, surely. It's just a matter of preaching, or not preaching, but communicating at the level of your audience, and appreciating your audience as well, and taking an interest in your audience, and not judging them, and not saying things like, I've got to dumb down my message for a modern audience. That's not very helpful language, because it actually makes you judgmental, and rather worse at communicating at the level of your audience, because you kind of judge them, because you're saying that they're not good enough for the Gnostic message, which is pretty not a very helpful or very pleasant thing to think or say. So anyway, these are just my little sort of pro tem kind of observations, and I mean, I don't know whether I'm totally off base here. As I say, I'm feeling a bit lost within the spectrum of Gnosticism, even though I think that my insights into Gnosticism, are just as valid as anybody else's. It's just a matter of, finding people who might agree might agree with that. But perhaps I've got to modernize myself, and I have to appreciate the modernity a bit more myself, really. Instead of criticizing it, I've got to embrace it, in order to really to make my message more well known to people, and then I probably perhaps would do more inspirational good in the world than I'm currently doing now, by just being part of some nebulous spectrum of Gnosticism, which is only appealing to a very niche audience.